to celebrate today's Larry Itliong Day celebration, I just want to start with a few remarks about our dear Manong Larry Itliong. Definitive histories of Larry Itliong's life and his contributions to the farm worker movement, to the Filipino-American movement, and to broader social justice movements have yet to be written by scholars. The only notable exception is the illustrated text written by our dear Dr. Don Mabalan. Don, you're here with me, sister. Don wrote The Journey for Justice, and we unfortunately lost her prematurely while she was working in what would have been the very first major biography of Manong Larry. There are numerous books on the farm worker movement and some of its other notable leaders, like our beloved Cesar Chavez and our beloved Dolores Huerta. Larry Itliong is at best recognized in a few scant pages or rendered as a footnote, if at all, in the academic texts and the more popular books that are out there. Books generally written by the academic elite, mainly white men who aren't from our community. Larry once said, just a warning, Larry said, I have the ability to make that white man know I am just as mean as anybody in this world. I can make him think, and I can make them recognize that I'm a mean son of a bitch in terms of my direction fighting for the rights of Filipinos in this country. That's Larry. That's Larry. Now, if Larry is invisible in the written historical record, perhaps that's why. As long as we are not at the helm of academia and the mainstream media, as long as we are not the ones driving the narrative and telling the stories of our people that go on record, a mean son of a bitch like Larry is an unlikely hero, one who makes people feel uncomfortable for his brashness, for his boldness, for his bravery. If Larry has been rendered a mere footnote in history for many decades, I would argue it's because his personality and his personal history, as it was connected to the history of the Filipino people more broadly, is one that most Americans with the power to tell the story of the farm worker struggle then and even now have trouble with. Larry arrived in the United States not quite as an immigrant, but as a colonial subject. He was born in the Philippines a decade after the United States violently suppressed the anti-colonial aspirations of the Filipino people. And the U.S. went on to create a public education system designed by David Barrows of the University of California system. Literally, David Barrows is the place where I got my PhD, the Barrows Hall. Until our people went to get that name removed from that building, the Americans used schooling to win the hearts and minds of the colonial subjects who remained alive after the brutally deadly Philippine-American War. Larry's arrival on the shores of the United States was the result of colonization. He, like other Filipino colonial subjects, were considered nationals, not quite aliens like the Chinese and the Japanese, who were favored low-wage workers for California employers in agriculture and other industries, until they were barred from entering this country after fierce anti-Asian campaigns led by the likes of Leland Stanford, the founder of Stanford University, and V.S. McClatchy, the owner of the Sacramento Bee. Larry's history of migration to the U.S. is one that makes dominant storytellers of the time uneasy. With the war raging in Vietnam in 1965, at precisely the moment that Larry, along with Cesar and Dolores, were being thrust into national headlines for their work in organizing the farm workers of the grape fields of Delano. Larry was a sore reminder, perhaps, of what one Filipino historian called the First Vietnam, at a time when Americans were fiercely divided about America's latest war in Asia. Larry's status as a colonial subject only served to surface aspects of American history as an empire that Americans continued to want to suppress. Another reason, perhaps, why Larry did not serve as the main protagonist in the accounts written about the farm worker struggles is because he was Asian. An irreverent, uncouth, cigar-smoking, seven-fingered, cursing Asian. The stain of anti-Asian hate and discrimination continued to color the perspective those responsible for news and knowledge production. Moreover, at the time the farm worker struggle had caught the attention of the wider public, it was the same time the media was attempting to paint Asian Americans as a model minority, as a means of delegitimizing the civil rights movement and the emergent Black Power movement. Larry simply could not, would not fit the mold. While we may never fully understand why and how Larry Itliong, a seasoned, dynamic, charismatic farm worker organizer, never emerged as the main character in most accounts, what is significant is despite his absence from written histories, Manong Larry continues to live on in the memories and the hearts of many of us decades after his death, because he was a force of nature to be reckoned with. He shook up the political landscape of California, causing seismic shifts that no earthquake could match. Larry's courage in speaking out and standing up, his audacity in breaking the mold, Larry's bold and brave work is what lives on in the work of the Central Valley Empowerment Alliance. Right here in the heart of the Central Valley, the breeding ground for the rich and the powerful, a beloved community of social justice champions carries on the best lessons of Larry Itliong. Manong Larry showed us that migrants, immigrant workers, even those of the humblest origin, even without the command of English, have the power to reshape and change the conditions of their lives for the better. Manong Larry showed us that there's no age limit to organizing and activism. He activated his fellow Filipino farm workers, many of whom were nearing retirement. He empowered them to speak out. He entrusted them with leadership. He demonstrated to a society that generally represents mass protest actions as something just young people do. He showed us that everyone can and should stand up for themselves. The movement that Larry led called on youth and students to humble themselves and learn from their elders. It encouraged them to leave their campuses and come to the fields and work alongside the workers. Larry showed us that solidarity is the key to win. He understood the power. Yeah, clap for that. He knew that solidarity was the key to win. He understood the power of interracial solidarity perhaps like no other. It was Larry who took the initiative to bridge the deep divide that the growers had cultivated between Filipinos and Mexicans. He and the broader Filipino community approached Mexican organizers and workers with an open hand and an open heart to build unities that had not been built before. One that would not only bring together Filipinos and Mexicans, but also Yemeni and other workers of color in a bond of solidarity so strong that it broke the stranglehold that employers had over them. Larry proved that people from the remotest of places, far outside of the cities, where the centers of communication are located, where places like this, where resources for organizing might be less, tiny little places like Delano. Places like Delano have the power in them to change the world. Woo! In Delano, yes! If Delano in 1965 could be ground zero for what became a global movement for justice, Poplar will be ground zero for a global movement for social justice today. Some people might feel like Larry's recognition, whether it's been his recent naming to the California Hall of Fame or in this dedication of the center, comes late because it's been over 50 years since the Delano grape strike. And it's been even longer since he started organizing in the fields, but I believe this is the right time. We need the kind of bold and brave organizing Larry represented and practiced. We need the liberatory, transformative change-making that is being done by the CVEA in Larry's name, now more than ever. The CVEA has the principle of racial solidarity, interracial solidarity, at its very, very core. It weaves together the histories and struggles of Filipinos, Mexicans, and Yemeni farm workers. It commits to removing the borders of separation that continue to be cultivated between them in their continuous fight for their rights as workers and as community members. CVAA also does the important work of honoring the fact that the land that we all occupy is stolen land, and thus worker and community organizing requires the acknowledgement of environmental justice and solidarity with Native peoples. That's what this is about. Though the books of Larry Itliong's past contributions still need to be written, and I guarantee you we're going to get those books written by this new generation of historians, the reality is the story of Larry Itliong has not yet concluded. It continues on right here, right now, in this place with all of us. We are the living legacy of Larry Itliong. As Manong Larry once said, everybody has equal rights and justice. You gotta make that come about. You gotta make that come about. They are not gonna give it to you. And the seeds being sown at this center is doing just that. It is making justice come out. Its work will be history making for the people of this region and far, far beyond. Yes, that's it. That's all of my remarks. Sí se puede. 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 Mabu, mabu, mabu. Hi, hi, hi. Mabu, mabu, mabu. Hi, hi, hi. Mabu, mabu, mabu. Hi, hi, hi. Mabu.